Thank you for sharing your lunch with us.
Good to have you, Alden.
Thank you, Austin.
So listening to that, I had CEO, entrepreneur, inventor, Navy SEAL, author, father of 3, 4? How many?
Four.
4. Where does it end? Are you a software engineer too?
2 dogs. 2 dogs. No, I am not a software engineer.
Okay.
That's too hard.
I have a hard time believing
that one's hard.
You'd be surprised. You could do it. So we're here to talk about your book. You just wrote Unstoppable Teams. I'm proud to say I read the whole thing. Thanks.
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was funny because I read nothing but sci-fi. That's the only thing I read. And I've never finished a serious book in my life. And I was reading that on a plane, and it was motivating me to finish reading it. So I thought that was really funny because I otherwise don't read a whole lot of nonfiction.
You know what? I could use an Amazon review just like that. The fact that it motivated you to go from one chapter to the next, that's a great compliment.
Great. Yeah, I'll put it on.
Thank you for reading it.
You're welcome. I'll put it on Google Play, though.
But good. Google Play, better.
So what inspired you to write this book?
I had written my first book called Be Unstoppable, and it took me 10 years to do it. And the trigger for writing that book was in SEAL Team, they make you write a just-in-case letter before you go off on a mission. And the idea behind a just-in-case letter is you kind of get out all your regrets, all your thanks, all your gratitude, so you can go in with an open heart and a clear mind into a mission. And should you come back paying the ultimate sacrifice, and they would hand a flag and a letter to your next of kin. And it took me so long to write that because I really wanted the just-in-case letter to be for my 4 boys. And one of my buddies did come back on his shield, and I knew he had to write this letter to an 18-month-old son. And I kept wondering, okay, what do you write to a child in knowing that you're not going to be in that child's life? So what could that be? And after 10 years, Be Unstoppable came out, and it was really a parable with nonfiction at the end of each of them. But the whole focus was about leading yourself. About leading yourself was about how to persist, how to get up every time you failed. And Anna read a whole bunch of wonderful accolades, but the fact of the matter is I've failed way more than I've ever succeeded, and I wanted to pass that along to my 4 boys, that it's all about persisting. And at the end of that last chapter, I talk about teaming up. But it was just 10, 15 pages. But there's so much more to it, because in the end, being able to lead yourself is just the beginning to teaming up with other people and doing something far beyond what you originally thought you could achieve. And so this was the intent, was to pick up where I had left off.
Okay, so you kind of switched gears whereas this one talks like in the first third or so about leading yourself, and the rest is about teamwork. The other one's all about yourself, and then the last section's about teamwork.
Right. The first one is really about dealing with the internal struggles that somebody has and deciding what they can or can't do.
Cool. Well, I understand you have, in the first chapter or so, you have a story, something about a monster from the Black Lagoon, and a man. There's no 2 ways about it. He has half a butt.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could maybe tell us that story.
Okay.
Mind if I step back and you give it to me?
Yeah, sure. So Austin is referring to this character. And this character is the creature from the Black Lagoon. And this is what you see when you walk through the entrance into SEAL training in the compound. You walk through the front gates after they give you permission to come in, and you turn to the right, and the creature's there. And it stands about 5 feet tall, and it's got that wooden plaque around his neck that says, "So you want to be a frogman." Frogman's a World War II term for a Navy SEAL today. And SEAL, by the way, is an acronym for sleep, eat, and lounge. That's what my wife would say. Sea, air, and land. And when you get to see that, it takes about 2 years to see the creature. And you have to do this simple little physical training exercise of push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups, a run, and a swim. It's condensed, but if you train for it, you can pass that. And on average, you have to have done that 3 times before you get to see the creature. And then even after you get to see the creature, you don't actually get to start SEAL training. They put you in this pre-phase training for about 7 weeks. And at the end of the 7th week, right before you're to start SEAL training, they make you do that test one more time. But this time around, they bring in this character, which I'll bring to life the story in the first chapter, which I talk about. And he was missing his left butt cheek thanks to a rocket-propelled grenade from his time in Vietnam. And he had this deep Southern accent, and he walks with a limp. And he walks in front of the creature, and we got about 122 of us there. And he says, "Class 181, gather around here. I want to let you in on a little secret. You all interested to know how to make it through Navy SEAL training?" And we're like, "Yeah, we want some of that." We were like kids to a campfire around this creature. "Yeah, I figured as much. You see, it ain't complicated. You just have to decide how much you're willing to pay." Now, here's the rub. I know for a fact 80% of you ain't going to be willing to pay the price. You know why? Because you all want to be a SEAL on a sunny day. And that's a problem. You see, your country, she don't need SEALs on sunny days. She needs them on scary days when it's cold and it's dark and it's wet. And that crack over your head, that ain't thunder. That's somebody want you dead. How bad you want to be a SEAL on that day? Well, that's my job. You see, it's my job to create a conversation between here and here. A conversation that's going to drive you to make a decision on how much you're willing to pay. Oh, how am I going to do that? Well, I'm going to do it just like those Japanese do making a samurai sword. You know how they do that? They take a hunk of metal and they heat it up and they pound on it. Then they stick it in cold water. You know how many times they have to do that? I'm like, I don't want to know that answer, right? About 2,000 times. That's what I figure I'm going to do to you just in my phase alone. My crucible right here. And what's this crucible? A large piece of broken up asphalt with little white flippers painted on it, some pull-up bars and some dip bars. That's it. There is nothing sophisticated there. And the cold water, well, that's a 49-second sprint from here. Mother Nature's going to provide that right in the Pacific Ocean. And while he's talking, these 26 instructors come out behind him. He goes, "Oh, yeah. And my hammers, well, that's these guys right here." And they're all standing there, smiling. It's not a drill sergeant approach in SEAL team. It's more like a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde kind of thing. So do yourself a favor. You think real hard before you start this training on how much you want to be here and how much you're willing to pay. And while you do, enjoy the sunny San Diego day. Bye now. That was Instructor Memphis. I talk about that, and it really is the scene that sets the beginning of the book. And I wanted to include that as the opening salvo to the book because it's that conversation between what I call the head and the heart. Now, you may think of it as can't, can. I call it the whiner and the whisperer, right? And we all know the whiner. You don't have to go through SEAL training to be introduced to our whiner, right? We all have it. You know how hard that's going to be? We have to recode that? Oh my God, it's going to take forever. How do you know we can even get it done on time? That's an unrealistic deadline. It can't happen. We haven't even created the technology yet, right? And then there's that whisperer. Whoa, wouldn't it be cool if we did it? How would we get it done? Hey, let's try it this way. The point of the fact that I use a couple of Navy SEAL stories in the book isn't to try and convince people to be a Navy SEAL. It has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with, hey, some of the same things they taught us being in the SEAL are exactly the same things we all use to overcome any obstacle there is. And that conversation of learning to lead inside yourself, which is really the first chunk of the book, is a very important start to leading a team, because the team becomes a direct reflection of you. And how you deal with that conversation internally will also be how you deal with the conversation that other people on your team are having as well. Dealing with the doubts, dealing with the I can'ts, and flipping the conversation to get them to focus on the I can. Let's do it.
That was a great story.
So there's the story.
That was awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, you talked about the head and the heart. I'm kind of curious. So I have an example of my life where I don't necessarily have the motivation I need to get something done. So when I go solo hunting, no one is depending on me. No one cares other than myself if I finish the mission and actually, go several miles in or just go, 20 feet in.
And eat some Snicker bars, some hot cocoa.
And head back out. I mean, if anything, my wife openly advocates for me to come back sooner.
Right.
So I'm curious, but I still kind of want to complete that goal. I want to go out and be serious and camp by myself. How do I motivate myself and kind of fight that conflict between my heart, which says you can do it, it'd be awesome if you did this, versus my head, which is like kind of freaking out?
We humans have something that, as far as we all know, no other animal has the capability to do. That's called transcendence. Transcendence is nothing more than a psychological term for our ability to envision something. We can envision a future. We can envision somebody's feelings. That's called empathy. We can envision an outcome. And I certainly didn't know the term transcendence when I was going through SEAL Team, or when I was looking at bankruptcy in developing my first set of products, realizing they were just not going to work. But I kept going through the suffering phase because I would think about, hey, what would this feel like if I got to the other side? And how cool would this be? And sometimes, like in the case of SEAL training, I got to a point where I was the only officer left in Hell Week, and I seriously considered quitting. And the reason I started to consider quitting is that I didn't finish off that story with Instructor Memphis. We started with 122, 64 passed that test. 6 weeks later, we're at 34 starting Hell Week, and Hell Week is this probably the greatest conversation that you have in at least first phase of SEAL training, and they take you from a Sunday evening to a Friday afternoon, and they give you a total of about 3.5 hours of sleep. And if anybody's spent multiple days without sleep, you know what happens around day 72 hours into it. You start hallucinating, right? Your brain is no longer helpful. You start running totally on your heart and what's important to you. And during those darkest moments where I started thinking of quitting, and the way I was thinking of quitting is that they were coming to me going, and they'd be whispering in my ear, "Sir, how do you think you're going to be able to lead a platoon when you're already down to 18 people in Hell Week, and this is only 6 weeks in? You're a terrible leader. You shouldn't be here. You can't lead. Do you see this?" And it was a real bruise to the ego because we had lost that many people. And I was really like, wow, he's right. We're 17 enlisted and me. And he got me doubting myself, right? Mm-hmm. And just when I would think about these darkest moments, I would flip the switch and think about, okay, well, what would the outcome be? Because I knew that I wanted to be a father somewhere down that road. What's my conversation with my child going to be like 20 years from now when I say to him or her, don't do what dad did. Stick it out. Keep going. Don't quit. Because the only reason I'd be doing it is that I just lost faith in myself.
That'd be a hard conversation with a child.
That's a hard conversation. And it was those moments of focusing on an outcome where I was focusing on the impact of how somebody else would feel. That was really important to me. That made the difference. So I bring it full circle to you sneaking around trying to shoot an elk or a deer, right? Perhaps you want to have children, and perhaps you want those children to go out and hunt with you at some point. Yeah. Well, boy, wouldn't it be cool to teach your child how to get that first hunt together? And how are you going to do that if you're just chickening out, sitting in a pile of rhododendrons eating Snicker bars?
Yeah. So that transcendence, then I guess I can use that.
So there you go.
It's good.
It's a long-winded answer, but...
Yeah. Well, that's very related to your book. And one thing that I thought was interesting is I don't remember a single time in the book where you mentioned that anyone can be a leader. In fact, you, in the first few sections, ask the readers to kind of introspect, ask people around them and find out what their skill set is. So if someone's if their skill set isn't prone to leadership, should they just set the book down? Like what's their MO for reading this book?
So what he's referring to is triangulation, and how do you find your superpower? What I do say is leaders, maybe they're born, but everybody's a leader. Mm-hmm. Every single person is a leader. Now you're just like, well, that's not true. Okay, do you drink Mountain Dew? Well, yeah. Do you have a couple of friends that go drink Mountain Dew with you over in those swinging chairs? Well, yeah, I do. Well, guess what? You just led your friends to go have some Mountain Dew with you. Now other people are smokers or coffee drinkers. You know, the only way that you're not a leader is if you don't have a follower. But even then, you're leading yourself. So the idea that you can only be born with a certain leadership gene, that's not what that chapter is about. That chapter is about, hey, what's your superpower? Because all of us, when you're building a team, it's like taking a whole series of puzzle pieces and trying to figure out how these pieces are going to go together to go in a direction to accomplish something bigger than yourself. The hardest thing for the leader is going, well, I've been ordained as the leader. Therefore, they must follow and do exactly what I say to do. That is not going to work.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. So that's something, a theme that I've pulled out of your book, as well as many other readings that I've done, fictional readings, of course, because there's only nonfiction.
But there's a lot of great leadership in science fiction.
Yeah, there is.
Ender's Game, you read that, right?
My favorite book.
There you go. Marine Corps reads that book.
Really?
Yeah.
Very interesting. So out of that, I was noting that humility as a leader was really important. Can you speak to that a little bit? Because you bring it up in your book. I've read it a lot of other places, and it seems like leadership isn't, as you write it, about showing how awesome you are, but instead showing how awesome all your teammates are all the time. So can you talk about humility?
The best way I can describe humility is if it becomes all about you all the time, there's no room for anybody else. It becomes this, it's all about me, therefore you're here to work. And I am a real stickler with the teams that I've built when people say, well, yeah, Alden, I got this team and I have 10 people working for me. I can't stand that preposition for. No, it's with, right? Every team, including what we had in SEAL team, this company, an entrepreneurial adventure, they're all volunteers. And they're all volunteering to decide, hey, I want to work because I think this would be an interesting place to take my energy and my efforts and do something greater than I could do by myself. It will be one of the biggest challenges that all of us leaders will face in the future as the gig economy continues to grow. People get more and more power to individually go, you know what, the heck with it. I'm going to drive Uber or Lyft, and I'm going to rent my sofas out in my apartments, and voila, I'm a new entrepreneur. But the real exciting thing is when people go, you know what, I tried that for a little while in the gig economy. It's not really all it's cracked up to be. I really want to go solve a big problem, and I can't do it by myself. And if you only have somebody out there thumping the chest saying, no, 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 you're here to work for me, that pushes people away. But if the person then says, I'm here to help you, I'm here to help you, I'm here to help all of us move in this direction to create something greater than any of us could ever imagine to do, well, that's an attraction.
Yeah.
Right? And all of us have pride and ego, and we also have a fair amount of insecurity. It can be very difficult for us to set aside all those different things to then say, you know what? You are awesome at coding. I suck at coding. I need your help. You are fantastic at communication, and we need somebody to communicate this to the other silos in Google. And when those sorts of acknowledgments, which is the humility piece, calling it right out, this is what I'm terrible at. I really need this help. People will more often than not, and because this is actually a proven scientific thing now, is we reciprocate with care. Unless you're a psychopath where the amygdala is no longer firing and you don't get an emotional connection, the large majority of us, our amygdalas fire. And when somebody holds a door open for somebody else, you typically turn back and say, oh, I'm going to hold the door open for, is there somebody behind me? Should I hold the door open for them? That's the same thing that I'm referring to when it comes to humility and, most importantly, the care framework that we talk about in the book, is that the more you start to show how much you care authentically for your team, the more they will care back and eventually start to dare, because they won't be worried about their own selfish desires. They'll be moving to a selfless desires of what the team stands for.
Cool, thank you. And you said the word CARE. It's a big acronym, right?
Yes.
You have a lot of acronyms in your book. Not as many as there are at Google, certainly. But
yeah, that is one thing software and military have in common: acronyms. I try to make mine really super simple because I'm terrible at memorizing things, so I made it out of CARE, because that's the main thesis of the book, is what I call care-based leading. And the more that you can build care-based connections with your team, and that is emotionally, the more they will mentally be triggered to say, hey, I'm going to go all in. Because the hardest thing is getting somebody to go from, yeah, I'm engaged, it's cool, I'm doing my work, I'm here 9 to 5, but I'm not thinking about the team problem in the middle of the night when I go to the bathroom. The people on my teams, I want you thinking, I want to engage, I want you to own this, right? And how do you get people to make that jump from only being selfish about them to like, oh no, we have to make this work? And that takes an emotional connection.
so could you tell us what the CARE framework is? Kind of break it down for us and maybe give us a story about it?
Yes, I can do all of that.
Excellent.
Let me think about that. Let me see the best way. So we had a couple of slides that we put together, and that first one was the creature. Oh yeah, now we're here. So I'm going to bring this slide up to you, and this slide was my greatest invention. I was going to solve the world of body fat problems. It's the world's greatest body fat device. It's called the rotating weight system, otherwise known as a body rev. Do you know what it does? No, it's super cool though. It's rotating, it's got weight in it, move it all around. No, that was a problem, right? I didn't really get that message. Nobody really understood that. I don't understand why something I hold in my hands is going to burn fat in my butt. You know, it didn't make sense to them. And I raised $1.5 million to do that. And I did it through 37 friends and family. And I had this small team that was with me throughout the whole adventure. And they were buying what we were selling. And that is 4 years of work. And eventually what happened is I got brought in to a small group of investors who said, newsflash, you don't have enough money left, because I had learned $1,475,000 worth of ways not to launch a product. I'm down my last 25,000, and they're like, you don't have enough money to pay the manufacturers, the lawyers, the accountants. It's over. You're embarrassing yourself. Go get a job. And that was one of the first big civilian moments for me, because I had gone to the Naval Academy and then I'd gone to SEAL Team. So my first real job actually was in software, and then I started this business. And I heard Instructor Memphis and a few other instructors going, how much are you willing to pay? And it was only because we had built such strong relationships with everybody on the team, and they worked for months without pay, and I was introducing these other people, these investors, to this next product, and that was this. And this, the perfect push-up, was 3 months from never existing. And it was because the people on the team had cared so much about, we weren't a fitness company, we were a company that was going to create a next generation healthcare company, that we were going to help people understand that the best healthcare was taking care of each other and themselves. So I bring those two pieces up because that was the trigger that took the care. And fellas, if you can bring me to the first step of team actions on the PowerPoint.
You could also just click through it here, I think.
I didn't want to ruin one slide that's hidden in there. If they can jump forward, because I saw what they were doing there.
I've heard of the second product. I had not heard of the first.
Yeah, 4 years of work right there. And the second product, boom, took off, right? So in a nutshell, those are the team actions. And I'm happy to go through them in a lot of detail. But I want you to think of it like a flywheel. It's connect, achieve, respect, empower. And when you look at each of those different actions, and you may say, well, it doesn't go exactly like that. Think of it from just the beginning stages of, okay, we have to assemble a team to create a new microservice. Who do I need on that team? Well, I need A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, right? What's the very first thing you do when you're creating that team? You want to connect with them. You want to make a connection to say, hey, this is where we're going, this is what we're all about, and how do you connect, and what's the purpose of connecting with somebody? And is it just send an email, or is it having that human moment together, like you and I did earlier this week when we got on Zoom together and we saw each other's facial expressions and shared some stories together, right? I break it down into what Connect is, which is through communication, credibility, and commitment. Communication, by the way, as you may or may not know, 55% of our communication is broken down into how we move our body. It's all body gestures. And then 38% is our tone. How important is this or not? And the last 7% becomes the words. That's what they say. But all of those pieces come into deciding in a very quick period of time inside your brain, hey, do I trust this person? Is this worth trying? Because the whole idea of connection is to build trust. And as you build trust, as you go out to achieve, because achieving is what a team does, is to set direction. And in setting direction, there's a whole series, and depending how long our fictitious micro web service team has to go to work, let's say they've got to take 2 years to build their thing. There's going to be a series of achieving that's going on where you're aspiring, you're assuming that they're doing the right things. At the same time, you're also setting up assessments to check on people. You're assuring them and you're appreciating the efforts that are going in and the perspective of what they've been doing. If you'll notice, I did C's, A's, R's, and E's because, again, that's my way to remember things. So thankfully, in the English language, you can describe lots of different ways in the same words. And then from achieve, it comes to respect. And respect is one of the areas where I think you'll find a lot of people make some mistakes. A lot of people go, I'm the team leader, therefore I have the authority, you must respect my authority. Even in the military and SEAL team, I was the young lieutenant going off to do my first deployment, yet the large majority of everybody on my team had multiple years of deployments underneath them, multiple more combat missions than I ever had. So if I walked into a platoon going, well, I'm the senior guy here, pay attention to me, that would have lasted all about 10 seconds. And by the way, they could have fired me.
Oh, really?
No. So the way you get respect is either through authority or through actions. And that's what respect's all about. And by the way, what's the point of even having respect? Why do you want it? Anybody?
You can shout it out. Get things done, he said.
Contribution. Exactly. You want to create an environment where everybody's point of view is respected enough that you may go, hey, I have a new idea. And you're not worried about somebody laughing at you going, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. No, mutual respect is about getting different points of view, that diversity of thought, which to me is what diversity is really all about, is you want diversity of thought, not diversity of heart. And the great thing about multiple different cultures is that you get the different points of view that can give you the different opportunities. But if you don't create a mutually respectful workplace, then the great ideas won't percolate. And then that brings you to empowerment, which is about educate, enable, and engage.
Yeah, so we actually care a lot about inclusion here, diversity and inclusion at Google. And it sounds like respect really goes in line with that, with making sure voices are heard. I think you had a story about someone when you were going to Bosnia who had an idea, a laptop?
Yeah.
Maybe you could tell that.
You want to hear that
Yeah,
story?
it's a good one.
Well, you got to promise me you're going to read the book if I tell all these stories out here. He's referring to a mission, and I don't talk a lot about missions, but there is one mission I talk at the highest level about, and that's in Bosnia. And we were hunting a person indicted for a war crime. And these people, there were 88 of them, and I think ours was number 2 or 3 on the list. It was nicknamed Dr. Death. And to really understand Bosnia is to understand how awful the human race can actually go. Thanks to the internet today, everyone's got to see how awful it can be. Most recently with some of the issues we've been dealing with over in Syria and in the ISIS caliphate. But all of that was happening in Bosnia. And we were on a mission to hunt this person down, but capture them and bring them live to The Hague to be tried for war crimes. And the challenge was that they wanted us to hunt this person, but take a picture where another team could go in and take the person with a series of armored vehicles and stuff. We were going to do these ambush roadblocks because, believe it or not, we weren't allowed to be offensive. They had to be defensive. And I got presented with the first generation digital SLR camera. It had a Kodak body and a Nikon lens on it. It was valued at $34,000. I know that because I was making $32,000, and the colonel was laughing at me that I just signed away a year's worth of salary for this digital piece of equipment. And we had a Toshiba laptop, Protege laptop, and we were going out into these thick woods of northern Bosnia and set up shop around. There were a bunch of troops cruising around, and we were trying to take this picture. And it turned out very early on that the Nikon lens and the autofocus couldn't keep up with the caravan that would come by every once in a blue moon. And we got the word that this mission is going to get canceled. And I asked the colonel, I was like, Colonel, you're talking radio talk, request 24 hours over. And he came back and roger that. It turns out he's a deep Southern guy too. And we were all sitting around. There's 5 of us huddled, and there's enemy in the area. And we're like, hey, what are we gonna do? How are we gonna do this? And my youngest, newest member of the team raises his hand. And you got to imagine, like we're all cammied up, and we got sticks all over us, and we're in this hide. And he says, sir, I think we should dig potholes. Like, potholes? Of course, we were thinking about cutting trees down and felling them over different ways, and we were going to create all this obstacles for these cars to slow down, because we had to get the car to slow down. And sure enough, his idea was the simplest, and we went to work with our night vision goggles, and we had IR lights, and you had to set up, because you had to evade the enemy while we're out in the middle of the night with one E-tool, chopping away at the road, making a pothole that would be big enough to make this Mercedes Caravan slow down so we could get the picture with our first generation SLR camera. That's part 1 of this story. We got the picture. But part 2 is you always do a debrief. And I lead the debrief, being the platoon commander. When you come back to the team and they say, okay, give us a debrief of all the different missions, what'd you learn? And all the new guys, because you're constantly bringing in new people, they're sitting in there. And I call out the new guy who was on our team, who's no longer a new guy because he's done 1 full deployment. I'm like, and that gentleman over there came up with a mission-saving idea. And that's what it was. And I bring that as kind of full circle to the story, because that's, after that, you saw all these other kids standing up like, oh, you mean I could participate in coming up with a good idea on a mission? And that's exactly what they want to have happen, right? They want to close the distance between the new person who shows up on the team and the most experienced person.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's the punchline to the story there.
That's a good story. Sorry to try to spoil the book for everyone.
No.
There's a lot more stories than that. So I think you had a story about an individual relating to the care circle there that you wanted to tell.
I do. Could you, gentlemen, pull up the soldier slide up there, please?
Appreciate all the hard work in the back.
So people often ask me, well, Alden, care is great and all, but what does that really mean? And how far is somebody going to really care for the team? And I can't think of a better, more selfless story as an example than Michael Mansour. Michael Mansour was a petty officer, 2nd class. It was September 2006. He was working in Ramadi. He was not in my platoon. He was years after I came out of SEAL team. But I knew Michael. I knew lots of Michaels. And Michael was on a routine training mission through Ramadi with a couple of other SEAL snipers and a handful of Iraqi combatants that were getting trained up to start taking over defensive positions for their city. And while they were going through it, and Michael is what's called an SSR, a sniper support rifleman, they come under unexpected enemy engagement. Michael finds, along with the 2 other SEAL snipers, a low rooftop, open story of a building, and they set up shop. And Michael's main job is to be the peripheral vision for a sniper. So snipers can go to work in a very close, confined area with that scope. And he's also the one responsible for calling in support and for guarding the exit and entrance onto the rooftop and getting the Iraqis out of the way. He calls up, hey, we're under enemy fire, I need some help. Sorry, assets are other places. Over about an hour or so, Michael ends up yelling the word that you never want to hear, certainly in a closed space. Grenade! Combatant had thrown a grenade up, hit his chest, and the grenade rolled by the exit of the building. You got about a second, maybe two, to figure out what to do with that grenade. And Michael did what we would all talk about, but you don't get trained for that. And he covered his body over that grenade. And what makes somebody do that? You don't get a bonus for jumping on a grenade. Like, there's no standard operating procedure for, hey, today is practice jump on grenade day. There's no medal that's like, gee, if I jump on the grenade, everybody in my family is going to be taken care of for the rest of my life. I get a bigger life insurance policy. There's no monetary gain. And I bring that example up because Michael did pay the ultimate sacrifice. He did posthumously receive the Medal of Honor. And most recently, there is a ship in his name that was just commissioned in San Diego in January called the USS Monsoor. I invite you to look it up. It's a super cool looking ship. It's a destroyer. Reverse bow and everything. He'd be very proud of it. But the point of that selflessness was he cared so much about his team. I know everyone's thinking, gee, you can't wait to die for your country. Believe it or not, we're not really that fired up to die for our country, right? The country is a big, amorphous thing. Like, yes, we're very patriotic, no doubt about it. Several of us have tattoos with the American flag on us. But what we really love are the people we're with. And the idea of letting down somebody else on that team becomes worse to us than dying. And that is an extreme example. I totally admit that. But that's how far, when you start thinking of building care-based teams, how far those extents will be. You'll never, thankfully, have to jump on a grenade. The grenades are different in the workplace as a civilian. The grenades are, oh, I've got to deal with a tough personality today, or I've got to deal with a client, or we got to figure out this one's going to cause me to work through the weekend kind of grenade, right? But if everybody on the team feels that there is a shared responsibility and accountability for that, then that's where the magic occurs to take you from being selfish to selfless and being really an unstoppable team.
Wow, that's a really powerful story. Thank you for sharing, and appreciate yours and his service.
Yeah, Michael. That's Michael Monsoor.
Thank you. So near the end of the book, you get into this idea called a 10 times advantage. Could you explain what that is?
So you built a team. We built our fictitious micro web services team, and we are going to go out and conquer a new category, right? And the easiest way to consider your team is A through F, or however many people you've got, right? Let's call it's a 12-person team. But there are a whole bunch of other contributors to your team that are actually important to helping your team succeed. Now, for some of you, you may laugh, but maybe it's your personal trainer that's helping a couple of you 3 times a week stay healthy enough and strong enough and have enough stamina to work through a weekend or pull that 24-hour when you got to meet that deadline. Maybe it has something to do with a team that's sitting over in India, right? That's supplying checking your code for you. And it's always within a community that you're supplying or trying to succeed in. What I find is a lot of people like, I got my team, we're super care-based, we're doing great. I'm like, great. How have you involved your external teammates? And I break the external teammates into what I call the 3 C's. of the customer, the contributor, and the community. And I create a parable in there and give a lot of different examples of corporations. I think Google is on a path of doing some of that, where they involve the community in and let them become part of the team and helping build and giving that feedback.
Yeah, we hope so.
Yeah.
So the 10 times advantage is about extending that care-based framework beyond just your immediate team then.
Right. And I came up with the term 10X because that is actually how military strategists look at special operations. And I say special operations because it's not just SEAL. It could be Green Beret. It could be Force Recon. It could be Air Force, CCT. Like there's a whole bunch of different special operations. They look at special operations as a 10X force multiplier on the battlefield. Now, that's great. There's 16 SEAL platoon or a 10-person ODA team. And I actually don't give a SEAL example on this story. I give the story of 12 Strong, the movie, ODA 595. That is a perfect example of what I'm talking about for how they did the 10X advantage. Their whole job wasn't about, they couldn't fight off 10 times their force. But what they could do is build relationships with the Northern Alliance, which was totally fractured, and take on something, which was 50,000 Taliban, much smaller or much larger than the 500 U.S. troops were in there. And so 500 U.S. troops in total took on 50,000. And how they did that was extending the team-based relationship building to a series of different contributor and communal groups.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I think that's all the questions I have for you. We'll open it up for questions to the audience in a second. And
I'd love some questions.
Really, thank you for coming out. Thanks.
Thank you.
Matt, would you mind tossing around the mic for us?
You're welcome.
I'm on. Oh, great. So LJ Irwin from Google Cloud for Startups. My question is, have you found anything or experienced either personally or through some of your reading or even from your network of activities or events for civilians that mimics some of the training that you went through in the SEALs, like the physical training, the mental training, and the skill-based training?
Yes. There is he's a little bit my senior. His name is Mark Devine. Mark Devine runs a Navy SEAL Hell Week-like experience down in San Diego. He's written a couple of books. He runs a very professional outfit down there. And just type in Mark Devine, you'll see SEAL Fit, and you can pay to suffer. You're welcome.
Great.
Just kind of curious. So it seems like real world challenges, I guess, aren't as clear cut as, say, like a military challenge, like the endurance of, doing 600 pull-ups versus, maybe working overtime, for a month or something. Working overtime for a month isn't necessarily, maybe the endurance, that we're supposed to be doing or a good thing. Do you have any kind of like guidelines for helping to see, say what the right choice is?
That is a great question. And there's a whole chapter that I talk about, a story called X Division. And it's what makes SEAL training easier from a leading perspective than being a civilian. I am not here to say, hey, just do what SEALs do and you'll be fine. Because civilians aren't SEALs, right? That's the key thing, is to understand, okay, how can you take what we've been talking about and apply it to the civilian? On the lowest common denominator, we all are human and we all respond with care. But I am not talking about care as a form of soft and cuddly and let's give everybody rose petals every day and how are we feeling? Do you need a massage right now? Right? The real care is much the same way, and like somebody asked me before, like, those instructors don't look like they care too much about you. Actually, they care a whole hell of a lot about us because they are going to rotate out and become part of our platoon again. So they want to make sure that they are putting people through the process that are going to be willing to be on that team. So I do want to clarify, when I talk about care, I'm talking about the care of helping people become the very best version of themselves for what the team needs. Second piece is X Division. In SEAL training and in teams, if somebody decides they don't want to be there anymore, or they quit, or they decide from an attitude perspective, this person is not helpful, they go to X Division. X Division is where they place everybody that isn't on the team, and you can't talk to them, and they can't talk to you. They're removed. They don't want that bad apple spoils the bunch in there. And attitudinally is one of the big challenges that they look at. We can't do that as a civilian, right? You can't create an X Division and be like, today you have a bad attitude. You're in the box, right? Doesn't work that way. So the first part is, what's the culture of the team that you're trying to build? When we talk about triangulation and trying to find people's superpowers, and I talk about these 7 traits for unstoppables, is first finding the people that fit the culture of the team that you're on. More often than not, one of my first questions when I interview people, hey, tell me about your greatest failure. Oh, well, God, I just succeeded all my life. I just been really lucky, I guess. That tells me 2 things. One, they may not have pushed themselves out of their comfort zone to really try something. And by the way, we're trying to create something new to the world here. We are going to fail. And failure is going to give us feedback, and we want to fail fast and get moving, right? And break. When I was getting interviewed for the psychological screening for SEAL team, the very last question they ask you, and you're sitting at this long table, and you got this super intimidating person at the other end, been a Navy SEAL forever, and he looks at me and he goes, I'm going to ask you one last question. And if you take longer than a second, you're out. I'm like, okay, I'm ready. It's like Family Feud, right? Going to hit the button or something. What are you most afraid of? Boom! I give him my answer, which is not 100% appropriate for being videoed right now, but it was about losing body parts. And he said, what? And I told him, and I gave him the whole reason behind it. And he goes, you know how many people have said failure? And they fail when I hear that. And so SEAL team was trying to screen people right out of the gate for if failure is your biggest obstacle, well, you already have a cultural problem with what we're dealing with, right? So you have that piece of it. And then the final piece is we all have bad days. Leading is sausage making. It's hard. All of us are different, yet all of us have basic operating systems, right? We all have different APIs. And the more we can learn to work with different APIs, the more we can build great teams. We're actually limited on our leadership capabilities by the amount of different APIs we can interface with.
It's a great answer. Thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you for that question. That's a great question. So is your other one too, by the way. Anybody else? Anybody? I'm happy to sign books, by the way. I'm here for
so
lunch.
we'll have them sign some books, and then we'll take them out to lunch. So if there's no more questions, I guess we'll end the talk. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Go make great stuff, Google.